I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
There is a strong likelihood that famine is imminent.
Urgent calls to boost the flow of aid as food insecurity reaches alarming levels in Northern Gaza.
We are in the final countdown to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
The Secretary General strikes an urgent tone at the UN Climate Conference. Can negotiators deliver on an ambitious agenda?
We need something to reflect the actual world that we have today.
From Security Council reform to the crisis in Haiti, a conversation with Ecuador's ambassador to the UN. Next.
UN officials are calling for more humanitarian access to conflict zones in the Middle East.
Civilians have been repeatedly deprived of their basic needs, and all humanitarian bottom lines have been breached time and again. The FAO IPC Famine Review Committee, in its latest report, has warned that access for humanitarian supplies to Gaza has fallen to an all-time low, and that the already dire humanitarian situation there is rapidly deteriorating, with an imminent risk of severe famine in northern Gaza.
The UN says Israel has missed a U.S.-imposed deadline to increase the flow of aid to Gaza. An estimated 1.8 million people there are now experiencing high levels of food insecurity. Acute malnutrition is at levels 10 times higher than before Israel started its latest offensive in northern Gaza last month. Israel's ambassador says adequate supplies are getting into the Palestinian territory and accused the UN of misinformation. UN human rights officials expressed growing concern about potential violations of international law.
The manner in which the Israeli military is conducting operations in northern Gaza suggests not only that Israel's actions are seeking to empty northern Gaza of Palestinians by displacing survivors to the south, but points to further grave risks of atrocities of the most serious nature.
Judija is monitoring developments inside the UN and has more on our top story. Dija.
Yes, Elaine. This week, Middle East, sadly, still dominates our discussion. On November 8th, the IPC report on Gaza was released. The interagency report suggested that the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is extremely grave and rapidly deteriorating. There is a strong likelihood that famine is imminent in areas within the northern Gaza Strip. Immediate action within days, not weeks, is required from all actors who are directly taking part in the conflict or have influence on its conduct to avert and alleviate this catastrophic situation. So, Security Council had a meeting on this report, and here are how some member states react to this report.
There is no excuse for the Israeli government's ongoing restrictions on humanitarian assistance. They fly in the face of Israel's public commitments. So let me be clear. My government condemns these restrictions in the strongest terms.
Israel, as the occupying power, must scrupulously comply with its legal obligations to ensure the well-being of the civilians in Gaza. It is illegal to deny the population sustenance and health care, and to take actions meant to physically destroy the population.
Israel must allow immediate, unimpeded access for the delivery of adequate food, water, medical, and nutritional supplies into and throughout Gaza. The siege of northern Gaza must end.
And Russian Ambassador Nebenzia claimed that U.S. political protection for Israel is why international community cannot stop the humanitarian disaster in Gaza.
If West Jerusalem were ready for an agreement, it would have agreed to it long ago, rather than putting forward more and more conditions. And Israeli officials at all levels would not talk about their intention to end Hamas once and for all. Frankly speaking, our American colleagues deliberately led us down the corner and bought Israel time to implement its plans to exterminate as many Palestinians as possible in Gaza and turn this territory into completely uninhabitable zones. It's time to act.
Пришло время действовать.
The Palestinian permanent observer Mansour challenged Israel to allow international media entering Gaza to see the situation through their own eyes.
But Israel will not, because it knows that what the international media will report will provoke a moral and political earthquake. They come and lie to the media and the stakeout outside, but they refuse to allow the media to go and report for itself the facts.
An Israeli ambassador criticized some agencies with the agenda to bash Israel not to do their jobs.
As we have seen before, there are agencies whose focus is bashing Israel, and there are agencies dedicated to real humanitarian work. This council has a responsibility to make that distinction and focus on enhancing those agencies committed to genuine aid, not those invested in spreading lies.
With all these comments, Knesset Bill's persona non grata status of Secretary General, is the UN the eighth front of Israel's war now? I asked Ambassador Danoon of Israel.
You said that Israel is now having wars at 7 fronts. Do you consider the UN the eighth front?
Absolutely not. We are a member state of the UN. We collaborate with many UN agencies. We are proud of our contribution to many fields, but we are at war. We are at war. We will win this war. We have no other choice.
Now back to UNRWA. The spat continues this week. In fourth committee of General Assembly, Ambassador Danoon asked Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, to resign.
You have lost all plausible deniability. Your thing disguised as an aid organization has fallen. If you have any decency, resign in shame.
And what does the spokesperson of the UN Secretary General think of this idea?
Just now, Ambassador Danoon said that Mr. Lazzarini should resign. If that would be an option to continue operation of UNRWA, would the UN consider that?
We're not, we don't work that way, right? Mr. Lazzarini has the full confidence of the Secretary General in his role as Commissioner General of UNRWA.
Well, I even asked Mr. Lazzarini himself this question.
My answer to this is that if my person would really make a difference, this is certainly something I should envisage. But I don't think it is my person which is attacked. It is my function. It is a Commissioner General which is primarily targeted today, and it is a part of this broader campaign to delegitimize the agency and UNRWA.
Mr. Lazzarini told us the goal to dismantle UNRWA has always been a political one. And why is that?
The objective is to strip the Palestinian from the refugee statute and also to unilaterally change the parameters for a political solution. It's a way to undermine the future aspiration of the Palestinian for self-determination. It's a way to undermine and to bury once for all the two-state solution.
Well, that's all from me. Elaine.
Shudaja, thanks. The stakes are high for the UN's climate conference. COP29 opened in Baku, Azerbaijan this week. Delegates will push for financing and implementation for agreements reached during last year's conference. This all comes as the Earth is once again on track to set another global temperature record.
The reality is that these extreme weather events that the world is facing daily suggest that humanity and the planet are hurtling towards catastrophe.
COP29 opened with dire warnings and ambitious goals. Negotiators are under pressure to agree to new financing and to fund the climate adaptation breakthroughs from last year's climate talks. It all may hinge on larger, more developed economies' willingness to contribute to help developing nations most vulnerable to climate consequences.
We must agree a new global climate finance goal. If at least 2/3 of the world's nations cannot afford to cut emissions quickly, then every nation pays a brutal price.
Climate finance is not charity, it's an investment. Climate action is not optional, it's an imperative.
The G77 plus China bloc is calling for an annual $1.3 trillion climate finance commitment. China's vice premier highlighted his nation's pledge to reach carbon neutrality by 2060 and called for greater commitments from the largest economies.
Developed countries need to increase climate ambition and action, take the lead in fulfilling emission reduction obligations, and move up to a timeline for carbon neutrality.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
In this conflict, civilians are paying the heaviest price. In spite of this very difficult and challenging situation, the UNIFIL peacekeepers continue to do their best to provide support and assistance to the civilian population.
UN Undersecretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix traveled to Lebanon this week. He met with UNIFIL peacekeepers who have suffered injuries. He also met the UNIFIL post damaged by Israeli tank fire and sites of suspected Hezbollah rocket attacks.
The latest wave of attacks by the Rapid Support Forces in eastern Al Ghazira state has been marked by what non-governmental organizations have described as some of the worst, most extreme violence in the last 18 months.
As fighting worsens in Sudan, so do conditions for civilians. More than 750,000 people are facing famine or severe food insecurity, and more than 11 million people have been displaced. Haiti swore in a new interim prime minister Monday. Alex Didier Fil-Ami pledged to improve security. The UN estimates 2.7 million Haitians live in areas controlled by armed gangs. The Presidential Council ousted previous Prime Minister Gary Conille after just 6 months.
Coming up.
We need Haiti to be a successful story for the UN and for the world.
UN Insider.
Ecuador currently holds one of the rotating seats on the UN Security Council. I sat down with Ecuador's ambassador, Jose de la Gasca. He reflects on his time on the Security Council now that he has returned to Ecuador this week to step into a new role as the country's interior minister. Ambassador de la Gasca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lane.
When Ecuador started its term on the UN Security Council, the war in Ukraine was well underway. You joined during the time when Ecuador took the presidency of the Security Council, and also by then, the conflict in Gaza was also happening. So if we look back, it's probably been one of the busiest years the UN Security Council has seen in its history. So what has been your country's role during this turbulent time?
I think in a polarized world with many conflicts, especially with the ones you mentioned, Ukraine, Gaza, our mission and our objective is always to serve as a bridge for consensus, as a vehicle of peace, as my president said. So that's what we've been trying to do in every single aspect that we have in the council.
Tell us more about your efforts to end the violence in Gaza and work toward a ceasefire. I mean, the world has been looking at the Security Council for solutions. We know that Ecuador even sent its vice president as a permanent peace envoy to Israel.
As you may recall, in December, I was parachuted directly in the chair of the Security Council. Then we had Article 99 invoked by the Secretary General. It didn't pass. But after that, our momentum was created. I even personally traveled to the Rafah crossing, with among other members of the Security Council, and we saw, firsthand what was happening there. What was happening in a humanitarian aspect with the trucks, with the people. So that changed your view, especially after what you've seen, you need to do something. That month, thanks to UAE, which was trying to enforce a resolution, it passed. It was 2720, a humanitarian resolution. We created a mechanism in Gaza for the humanitarian aid. And I think after that, that's been, something that guides us. But not only in a humanitarian situation. The role that every E10 member has played within the Gaza problem, because of the, of the risk of a spillover effect, I think it's been crucial.
You mentioned spillover effect. We're seeing now a situation with Lebanon. Is there any hope, any optimism on your part as you have these continual discussions within the Security Council that things could get a little better soon?
Yes, I do think so. Right now, we're working on something. I think we have had a collective voice, unanimous voice, for instance, in support of the Secretary General, in support of UNIFIL, and now we're seeking for something else. But I think sometimes these type of process, they grew up in baby steps sometimes, but they go forward. And that's an important message that we need to send. We are working on it, we are finding consensus, and we're seeking our way to peace.
During Ecuador's term as president of the Security Council, you held a couple of signature events. One dealt with transnational crime, and the other dealt with small arms, which when you look at some of these issues compared to the conflicts and the wars going on, they might not get as much attention, but your country has been in the middle of all this. You have firsthand knowledge. So tell us a little bit about these initiatives.
Threats to peace and international peace and security can come everywhere. We can be exhausted trying to find the root causes. But in our regions, in some regions, we have a specific, diseases, specific plagues. Some of it are related to international organized crime, so or the traffic of light and small weapons. So we thought that it was a good idea to bring that discussion, to take it as something that the Security Council need to pay attention. We have that discussion, and now everyone is thinking that organized crime can swift to terrorism, that can rapidly can become or is definitely a threat to international peace and security. So that was, that was our point, to try to give the attention that these realities in different regions can create, and that we can become a window of opportunity for this type of groups and gangs. So you can see what happened in Haiti. You can see what is happening in my own country, which we are fighting a war against organized international crime. So this is something that we believe that the international community needs to pay attention and needs to address immediately.
Your country, as you mentioned, has a strong voice and is really working toward finding solutions to what has been happening in Haiti. Tell us about the proposals that you've brought forth when it comes to the security crisis there.
Well, yes, there are many crises. It's a multidimensional crisis. We care for the Haitian people, and we care for Haiti. So our responsibility within the region is that to show that this region is a region of peace, but we don't leave anyone behind. So Haiti have our support, the United States support, and the international community support. And within our term, we've managed to pass, the BNU resolution, the renewal of the BNU resolution, the MSS authorization, and the sanctions even, renewal. So, and all of that by consensus. So that shows international community that we can get together and that we can see in the same line when it comes to peace and security, and when it comes to working together for, achieving some goals. And we think that the collaboration of the international community, for instance, Kenya, is key. But we also advocate that the international community can still help, Haiti, because of the funds that we need to wage this operation and to make it successfully. We need Haiti to be a successful story for the UN and for the world.
There have been some proposals to reform the Security Council. That is nothing new, but there has been a push by African nations to have representation, 2 permanent seats on the UN Security Council, as well as a handful of other non-permanent seats. What do you make of expanding the Security Council?
The picture that was taken almost 80 years ago is no longer the picture of the world that we have today. So we need something to reflect the actual world that we have today. You know, the new members, the new important rising powers that we have in the planet. So I think a shift in the structure of the UN, it's necessary. I do believe that the Council needs to change and needs to be more inclusive of some countries, that we need to have a voice, especially within the E10 members, within the elected members. It's just one world and many countries, and we all need to be there. Not all, but we need to be more represented within the regions.
When we look at the Security Council, Ecuador sits next to China. What have you learned during your time on Security Council, just being colleagues together, working together?
China always to my right, yes. And in my time, I have the privilege to work with two permanent representatives from China, and both of them have taught me a lot. You know, they always are very, very focused, very serious about the job and about their position, very responsible, and taking care of their perspective from the charter. But also to our left, I have friends. So it's always good to see the balance between the P5 and the positions that we're having there. So yes, I mean, I've learned a lot from them.
Ambassador Jose de la Gasca, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up.
So one seed is the new generation of a crop, but then it holds all the history of this evolution.
UN Insider.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
This week marked the UN's International Week of Science and Peace. The aim is to highlight the crucial role science can play in creating a more sustainable society. Part of that includes finding ways to feed the planet's ever-growing population. In Colombia, science is helping plant seeds for the future.
As the population of the planet grows to reach 8 billion, a question presses on. How do we feed all these people? For some, the answer is in the seeds.
It's these seeds that are really the sustain of so many people. I mean, we eat at breakfast, at lunch, and even dinner. And we don't know sometimes where our food comes from.
In the 1950s and 60s, the Green Revolution was the answer to world hunger. High-yield varieties of high-calorie crops, such as rice and wheat, pumped agriculture into a global scale. But in the process, unintended consequences arose.
In the last century, the whole humanity started to homogenize the diet. That means we all in the planet, passing the years, are eating similar things.
Carbohydrate-intense diets may have helped slow down starvation, but malnutrition spreads. Crop diversity is weakened and unstable food production methods threaten food security. Now new technologies are used to reverse the effects of monoculture brought on by the Green Revolution. Biologist Marcela Centelle says it is important to go back to the root cause of our problems and analyze the seeds.
That is a challenge because diversity within those crops are also diminishing because of these improved varieties or improved seeds, and then the traditional or the land races that were originally used by farmers are no longer used. That's when, or where the gene banks really, the purpose of the gene banks is important, because we try to conserve as much land races and as much original varieties as possible, because farmers in their respective fields, if they do not crop them or they don't grow them in the fields, then the seeds will die at a certain point.
Centelle works in the world's biggest tropical seed bank located in Cali, Colombia. Seeds of the Future is a huge repository of rich variety of seeds. It can hold up to 250,000 to be exact.
Here at the gene bank, we do not conserve genetic transformed or modified seeds. What we hold here is a diversity that is the result from selection of nature or also farmers in decades or centuries before. And therefore, we conserve the whole diversity or agrobiodiversity within the seeds.
These scientists explain that genetic diversity is what will make crops resilient to withstand the droughts, heat, diseases, and floods brought on by our climate's crisis. The facility is a place where agricultural research is done, and seeds are maintained and safeguarded for hopefully hundreds of years.
Of course, one seed is the new generation of the crop, but then it holds all the history of this evolution, selection, and domestication of this. So gene banks with the specific temperatures and drying processes try to maintain and keep these seeds alive for 50, 100, or even millions of years if possible.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.